Welcome to Tuesday Talkies, where we discuss the items in the music business that are important to you. I'm Peter Schwinge, and joining me today are my fellow co-hosts, Sam Tall, the Duke, and our new co-host, Ayesha Adamo. We're going to discuss copyright legalities artists are facing with their live streams, the fate of Napster, Live Nation's challenges, the value of creation left behind many who have passed during this pandemic, and how it has been brought to light, plus the power of derivative content. So let's get to this. Today, we're going to start off with something to think about. Recently, DJs and musicians have had their live streams abruptly ended, and some accounts have even been suspended over copyright violations. In an article on Paper website, Copyright Claims Are Ruining Live Streams for Everyone, in it states, a spokesperson confirms that Instagram worked closely with DJ D-Nice to ensure that the homeschool stream went smoothly. But when asked to clarify the normal rules for streaming DJ sets on live, they said there are a few more limits to what's allowed. While our partnerships with music rights holders allow people to add music to the moments they share on Facebook and Instagram, music rights are complex. And there are layers to the limitations in how we can allow people to include music in their live videos. It's a vague statement, but we do have to acknowledge that music rights are indeed complex. Some services have cleared the rights for usage, while many have not. On top of this, different countries have different regulations and definitions of what constitutes a broadcast. It is important to note D-Nice has 2.3 million Instagram followers. So is this just another case of if you're popular, you can get away with it? Or did he clear every song that he performed? If so, that is a lot of licenses to clear. And does the same circumstances apply to the everyday DJ? A big issue is not just from clearing the rights to a song, but anytime a song is put to a visual medium, it requires a sync license. Therefore, both sides, the sound recording and the composition, need to be cleared. There is even more to it if it is interactive or non-interactive or on demand, which is a whole other conversation. Anytime music is played in a venue, bar, restaurant, and the like, the venue must have a license from the Performance Rights Societies. The same holds for true in radio and streaming. Now, with video live streaming platforms having virtually a 100% adoption rate during this quarantine, we're looking at a future with an archaic copyright process in place. Even when we come out of this, people will still be live streaming and finding loopholes. All the while, service providers will be under pressure to enforce copyright regulations or face their own consequences. Right now, there is allowing artists to do live streaming and for audiences to enjoy it is one of the only things that are keeping people in good spirits at this time. This is helping a world of people. But where is the line between streaming for fun and streaming for profit? Whether tips or sponsorships? And how can fair payments be made to the song creators without disciplining the live streamers? This is a new era for sure, and that's something to think about. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Leave your comments below and engage in the conversation. Next up, it looks like Napster is in trouble. Real Networks, which holds an 84% stake in Napster, has published its quarterly financial results. Napster's subscription revenues grew from $24.3 million in the first quarter of 2019 to $26.3 million in the first quarter of 2020, an 8.2% increase, though pales in comparison to its competitors. They also have cut down its operating losses in Q1 of 2020, but they're saying they need outside funding within the next 12 months to survive. Let's turn to Sam Tall with his latest take on this. Sam, how's everything in LA?
Everything's great. You know, it's been really nice now that I think it's week 9 for me since the beginning of offices getting closed. But things getting into normal. The news kind of seems like it's back in cycle, and we're dwelling less on things like, how does this affect concerts, and more about like, okay, what's happening in the actual business? Let's actually get some work done.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about the effect on Live Nation in a moment. But let's take a look at this, where we're talking about Napster.
Mm-hmm.
which was at one point the bane of existence for the music industry. and well, even Lars Ulrich has finally gotten he was at Sean Parker's wedding, so
Right.
we started getting along.
How the tables turn. I mean,
Yes.
it is very fascinating to think about the position that Napster once held, especially among the recording business and the folks who were like so adamantly trying to defend against a sort of a digital future that at a certain point seemed inevitable. And now here we are, where streaming revenues are through the roof across the board. And we look at somebody like Napster, where I don't know what necessarily happened, if it was the multiple changes of hands, whether it's like Comcast and Real Networks and Rhapsody and the rebranding and the consolidations, but they just haven't been able to compete with the aggressive growth of other platforms. And I think this might be the end of the road.
It certainly is a challenge. And one of the things with live streaming with any of these companies has always been that, and you go back to Pandora years ago, and when you look at Pandora, it's like 65% of their operating costs went to licensing of music.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, it's like you now have your staff, you now have your marketing, you have everything else. And so you only have a 35% operating budget for that.
Right. Well, and that's true for Spotify as well, where, I mean, even more than that, they're largely regarded as having spent like, okay, 70% goes to rights owners, and that's their like top line advertised figure. But it really ends up, if you look at their costs and the way that they've reported out, especially as they're running up to their direct listing on the stock market, that it was more like 80% plus. And a lot of that has to do with minimums that are owed to the labels and publishers. And I would assume that Napster, aka Real Networks, has some of that going on as well, a certain amount of minimum payments, minimum guarantees. That's pretty frequent. And it's sort of, you try to make that up through usage on the platform. But I mean, the thing that I didn't really realize until somewhat recently was that Napster is, aside from just being an actual consumer-facing streaming platform, they do a lot of white label B2B sales, in the sense that they're powering the streaming platforms for things like iHeartMedia and other websites and systems that want to have a music streaming application built into their suite of services, but they're not going to spend the time and money to research, develop, and license all that content on their own. It becomes sort of a streaming plugin. I would have thought that business is more robust than it seems to be. That seems like a really good driver of revenue that doesn't require a whole lot of extra cost to accomplish, because it's just a lot of front end and not a lot of back end that's already been done in terms of licensing. But maybe there are cost structures in there that don't scale well that I'm not aware of.
Well, it's interesting to know. One of the things that I also saw recently was Daniel Ek was talking on, and there was a reference to, he made a comment similar to YouTube 4 or 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
for saying like, if they can be more of a radio, put more into radio and tap into that $18 billion market from radio. And now that can help drive Spotify and get more money to the creators, which, it's like, that's what YouTube said 4 or 5 years ago. So now
we've tried that already.
Yeah.
Like Spotify tried that already. Spotify turned off its radio features really largely in favor of This Is Artist playlists. Mm-hmm. And now it's written by songwriter type playlists, which I think are fantastic. But like, you don't have a continuous, artist radio anymore. You have a limited, sort of like summary overview kind of playlist. And then you can have, your daily mix, which I guess is radio, but it's not different really. It's not radio in the sense of like Sirius, or even in the sense of like Pandora, where it's non-interactive streaming.
And that's the thing. There's the going back to my earlier comments, is like interactive, non-interactive, on demand. There's so many complexities in the licensing, different rates, different legalities. It's just, it's an archaic copyright system that's been trying to be fixed. But anytime something gets passed, that's already 20 years behind.
Well, and I want to just put this nail in it. But as an artist manager and as somebody who's spent, the past almost, nearly a decade in digital rights management specifically, I have a lot of love for the people who can figure out compelling and valuable monetization models, right? If we can figure out a really productive way to allow people to enjoy and engage with content that really kind of maximizes the value potential for the creators and the rights owners, I think that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. There's an archaism to the way that the system is set up. There's an archaism to the processes that labels and publishers are going through with these new platforms to try and license them out, and really kind of just like, it's inevitably one side gets shaken down, whether it's the rights owners or the platform, but somebody's getting the raw end. There's never really like a mutual benefit kind of conversation, and it ends up with something like Napster, where like they started at the beginning of like being public enemy number one, and now they're one of the first like significant major players to start to potentially fall off the map, because the system that they exist within, the protocols that are in place around rights licensing and content distribution are onerous and expensive and difficult and unfriendly. And I mean, frankly, yeah, there are way better options. I'm sure that Napster as a product definitely didn't keep up, but it almost seems like they could pivot if they felt like they had the ability. But it just, from what I've seen, and there's not a lot of information yet, but from what I've seen, it seems like there's just operational costs that they can't avoid, and that's really what's hamstringing them.
It's finding that balance between being able to pay the creators that are on that platform and balancing operations. So,
Yeah.
One of the themes so far today has been like the quarterly reports. If we want to take this over to the live sector, which it's been crippled, Live Nation in their Q1 report saying they aren't seeing. Michael Rapino is saying that he didn't see a large demand for refunds,
which is surprising.
Yeah, and but you're hearing like there's furloughs, there's layoffs, and but what struck me about that 90% of fans, we don't have to discuss their numbers because we know everything is down, and even with that that buy-in from the Saudis, which we all should be paying attention to what's going on in that. But they're saying that the concerts have been rescheduled. Fans are opting to hold onto their tickets despite refunds being available. So what are what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'll kind of start anecdotally and then zoom out. I actually just yesterday had an artist who was supposed to be playing in Nashville in April. That obviously didn't happen. We knew that, end of February, beginning of March, that it was likely going to get pushed as far down the road as possible. So we originally rescheduled April for mid-June, and that was supposed to coincide with a record release and a whole lot of other great things. And we just had a conversation with the promoter. Hey, that's not going to happen either. Do you want to cancel and we'll look for a new date, or do you want to take a new hold in the following quarter and then see what happens when we get there? And I said, look, we can cancel, but then we're cutting everybody adrift. We're kind of like basically saying, we don't know what's going to happen. Don't wait for us. Go find something else to do. Or we can say, we're committed to doing this. We're committed to having this experience with all of our fans, and give us a few more months, and we're going to try to do what we can to make this happen. So we're talking about what holds are available for September and October for a concert that was supposed to be in April and then June. And I would much rather like repeatedly, ask the artist to go and say like, look, we're postponing again because we have to, but we're going to do this, and have that clarity of communication, as opposed to the unknown of just like, we're canceling. We don't know when we're going to do it, but at some point, just like stay tuned. It's like, nobody's staying tuned. There's too much going on. As for the overall concert business, I think a lot of people, the fact that very few people are pursuing refund options that are available. Number one, I just don't know that many people know that they have refund options available. They might think that they just don't. And secondly, especially for larger concerts where the tickets are $100, $200, even $300 for the right seats or more, depending. Like that's a significant investment. They've already committed to doing that. There's a sort of a sunk cost involved, and they don't want the money back. They want that experience, and they want to make sure that if they because if they get that refund, they don't know when they're going to get the chance to have that experience in their time, right?
It's almost holding on to the fact that we are going to be out there cheering and listening to live music, and that's kind of keep, on the psychological side, it's almost keeping hope.
Entirely, and I think that's super important. It's easy enough to look at that from like a fiscal, analysis perspective, but really it comes down to the psychology of keeping hope for what will eventually come around. Now, the thing that really frustrates me, though, is that, of course, for anything that doesn't have a big pre-sale, like an arena concert where it's indefinitely on hold, but the tickets are still valid, things that are smaller concerts, shows that are definitely canceled, and the tickets are all refunded by default, like that's where the hits happen, right? That's where the revenue impact is for Live Nation. And when you have like a 20 to 25% drop in revenue, you got to have a 20 to 25% drop in cost, to kind of keep up with it. And we've seen every agency, shed staff. We've seen a lot of other, companies across the live sector, venues closing, Live Nation furloughing people. I'm hearing rumblings that there's going to be even more. I mean, we don't know what Live Nation is going to look like on the other side of this. We know they're holding on to a lot of the revenue that they already had. They've lost quarterly revenue, but there's still money in the bank. We know that they're trying to raise money. We know that Michael Rapino is going to give up some or all of his salary, but he's probably still going to be entitled to certain bonuses that are always like 2 or 3x his salary. And the people who are in charge of coordinating the concerts that are going to have to get rescheduled, well, if they're out the door, I just assume the worst, that we're going to come back from back into a full concert season with a calendar that's to die for and nobody to really run it well. And only the people that are left are going to stand to benefit.
Right. And it's going to be crazy once the floodgates open and all the talent buyers and all the booking agents, it's going to be that the gates are open. It's going to be a mad dash of trying to fill in where you can. And it's going to be a slow rollout. It's not going to be like, all right, every venue's open. There's going to be capacity limitations. So it's going to be a crazy time. So thank you for this, Sam. That's a great insight. And thank you very much. So next up, we have, one thing that's been hitting home during this, the one thing that's been hitting home, this greater effect during this crisis, hearing about the passing of many great artists and creators. And one of them recently, Danny Leake, who was a legendary Grammy-nominated studio and live engineer. He worked as Stevie Wonder's front-of-house engineer and recorded dozen others. The pandemic has brought to light some truly great titans and their contributions. And to talk more about this, I'd like to bring up our newest co-host, who you may recognize from the Sanctuary at Music Industry City, Ayesha Adamo. Ayesha, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Glad you can join us. So anything that Sam was talking about that popped out?
Oh, well, following what's going to happen with all these things with concerts, also, because I do acting as well with theater, any of these live performance things, I think it's great if we can keep the hope and hold on to those tickets like, it's going to happen, because it is ultimately. We just don't know when. And so I think it's good news that people are holding on to their tickets, and hopefully we can all get through this.
Yeah. So this was an interesting. You emailed me about this this topic, and and Danny, being one of the industry titans, but yet not in the forefront. And I think that was something that this time and era is bringing more exposure to the true creators behind the scenes. So
Yes.
what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the reason I wanted to talk about Danny is because I was hit hard by his passing. I worked with him on an album with a rock project called Loss of Eden, which didn't go anywhere. We recorded this beautiful music, and it didn't go anywhere. And yet, to lose an amazing person like that, you suddenly realize the value of the journey, the value of having spent the time in the studio and done all those, beautiful songs, even if it didn't become the outward success that it should have been. I think this time with people leaving us, and great people leaving us, people who are wonderful mentors, and Danny mentored so many audio engineers who ended up, working with Kanye and Common, and, the outpouring of all those engineers who he mentored is incredible. And also the artists. First, it brings to light this idea of, even if you don't feel like you're part of the scene in the way you want to be, or your career isn't going the way you want it to go. And I know as a musician, there are ups and downs, we're very accustomed to that. But even in those lows, you have to realize that there's so much gold there. And as difficult as this crisis is, and as many tragedies as there have also been these opportunities to have that kind of gratitude. And secondly, it brings to light this idea of, well, what kind of leader do I want to be in the industry? What kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to be with the other artists I work with and the other people around me? What kind of person do I want to be thought of as? So those are the kinds of things that I've been thinking about through this.
And that's it's really interesting. It's right now is that time that, and you touched upon it there, is like, think about what, at some point in people's lives, they think about the legacy they want to leave behind. And usually that comes later in life. But it's also something that people, when they're younger and the creators, like, what do I want to bring to this world? What do I want to create? What do I want to accomplish in my own, what do I consider success in my own standards?
Mm-hmm.
And right now is a perfect time to actually begin that self-reflection and look into it. It's like, hey, we're coming out of a very disruptive time. What's going to be the innovation? What's going to be the creativity that comes out of this? What are going to be the new challenges? How can I poise myself? How can I look deep inside and really understand, what do I want to be?
Exactly. And how can I reach people? Like doing this right now, like, how can we share the information we have and the experiences we have with other people who are going to benefit from that? I mean, it brings home a lot of things, that the power of what you can do, even just as yourself and just by being there. So,
right on. Yeah. Thank you. This is great. Ayesha, we're gonna have you back. We're going to talk more about these type of topics. And I know we got the Duke here. And thank you, Ayesha. That was great insight.
Absolutely.
And again, if there's any comments, leave them. You want to talk more about this, leave the comments in the down below, and we'll gladly chat. So thank you again. So the final thing we're talking about is derivative content and why it's important to the creative community. And just as a definition, so according to the Copyright Act, a derivative work is a work based on one or more pre-existing works, such as a translation, musical arrangement, dramatization, fictionalization, motion picture version, sound recording, art reproduction, abridgment, condensation, or any other form which a work may be recast, transformed, or adapted. A work consisting of editorial revisions, annotations, and other modifications which, as a whole, represents an original work of authorship. This is a derivative work, and derivative works are also known as new versions. So that's the long-winded legal definition of what a derivative work here is. But here with us to discuss the power of derivative works is the person we like to call the Duke. Welcome, Duke. How are you?
I am blessed, my brother.
We're blessed to have you. So, hey, so just, you've been listening in. Anything that, we've been talking about that really strikes you?
I mean, I'm just amazed that we're even talking about Napster. And like, I just remember, how long ago it was, and that, I mean, I just didn't even know they still existed. So to me, that's amazing right there. And then what Ayesha was saying is like, that's just so much heart and love, the importance of creating and living versus like focusing on, okay, when it's done, this is what matters. And that ultimately doesn't matter. It's really about like this moment right here. It's like you're already looking towards the next meal when you should just be worried about like, is there enough sauce on the food that you have on your fork right now? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. It's important. So, last week we talked about saying creative, and you were saying like, creatives are going to be creative. It's like, whether you're in lockdown, because we're used to be in lockdown, but a lot of times, a lot of creativity comes out from pre-existing works. And inspiration and influence from that. And that's where we get derivative works. So, tell us more like what you're thinking about with like, talking about the power of derivative works.
Yeah, so it's like once this quarantine hit, it was like, okay, like you're locked down in this room now, and what are you gonna create? So I had to create things because I'm a creator. So I just started like going into YouTube. Like Shinobi Ninja, I've had some, a decent amount of success with the band. You have over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. So I was like, all right, let me start creating content. Let me really just focus on content. And then as I did that, I started seeing these like reaction videos and like remixes, and then I realized I was like, man, like. I did this one remix to this Spanish tune. So long story short, like I kept hearing this Spanish song over and over to the point where I was like, I heard it in a Salvation Army and I said, well, now it's crossed over. It's not just a Spanish song. This must be a hit. I looked it up. It had like 1 billion views. And I said, wow, let me remix it. So I did like a rock remix of it. And like I put it out and, it got 100,000 views. It just got a lot of views. And I said, well, this is something I just burped. Like, what if I just did this like all the time? What if I just started doing reaction videos to every Tekashi 6ix9ine video that came out? Like that stuff counts. And, and then I started seeing the strategy of other people where they're like, guys would put out like 100 reaction videos and build their whole channel on that. And then their 101st video would be their own original song. And they would talk to their fans or subscribers and be like, all right, guys, thanks for watching my reaction videos. Now I'm going to drop like a real song. And then like, if you can have 1 million subscribers or 100,000 subscribers and 500 people buy your single because they've watched all your reaction videos, that's good. And all you had to do is just react to things that already existed or remix things that already existed. And, being an artist, I was like, nah, man, I don't want to cover other people's songs. I want to write my own songs. Mm-hmm. But it's, it's a certain maturity that it takes to say, okay, well, you've written 1,000 songs. Why don't we do the first remix? You know what I mean? And keep the ratio of like, that derivative content and using that as like a way to like bring people in, because there's a conversation that's happening and it might not be like Ayesha said, it might not be the album that you just created, but if you can connect to something that's already happening, you put yourself in the stream, and you can drink from that water.
Exactly. And something that's really interesting, how it's kind of come full circle. What you're saying, like from the music side, what years ago, it was the creation of the supergroup. And that would bring in fans from all the other groups to the super group. And then then you get into like more of the 90s. And then there was the collaborations. That started becoming the collaboration era and into the 2000s. So you want to attract a new audience. You're like, hey, let's bring in the singer for a feature. And then remixes, and you go into girl talk and all that. That's a whole different story. And that going back to the legal copyright issues, what is defining what a derivative work is. But when you're talking about YouTube and that the community from YouTube, maybe they didn't even realize they were doing it, but they were picking up from the music industry, is that they became that community. It was the insiders. It was, somebody started a YouTube channel, it started to pick up a little steam. And then they saw somebody that had maybe a similar topics and they would invite them over into their channel and it'd be cross-shared. I mean, Rebecca Black's Friday did not become a huge hit for the sole fact that she just came up with that, she had that song. It was also, people were tuning in just to see what it was about. But then you saw other people chiming in. So here's another YouTuber song person or somebody doing a cover song, and they would all show up in each other's videos. And then that's how they all they blew up in a sense.
Definitely. I also think like, with the quarantine energy, like the live shows and things like that, which I've done my whole life, it's like once they shut that down, it was like, all right, well, what's the next move for you? And what's the next move for us all? And there's real dollars in like making content, mm-hmm. And if you make 1,000 things of content and you just put that in the back, all those guys are little stocks for you. Like they're all going to generate, even if they generate 10 cents, if you have 1,000 things that generate 10 cents a day, it's like, I could take you out to eat. You know what I mean? Like it matters, mm-hmm. It adds up. So it's important.
It's those micro payments. And if you can be on different platforms and getting micro payments and things like that, and you start putting up content, it becomes passive revenue. And you have to get to, like, say, YouTube, you have to get to 100 subscribers to actually create your name for your channel. So everybody who's tuning in, hit that subscribe button, or is it on that side? I'm not sure, but hit that subscribe button because we want to get that channel, that we want to get the channel name. Then when it comes to monetization, then you need 1,000 subscribers, and you need to be putting out 4,000 minutes of content, or like not 4,000 minutes, the views of 4,000 minutes. So that is a lot. And it's just about putting out content, creating, and start. If you're just starting, then start. Don't hold back. Put something up there, and you look at and in a few years, you're going to look at your first video and you're going to cringe. But if you go to some of these other YouTube stars or people that have these long subscribers and they've been doing it for years, you hit that reverse timeline and show oldest first. You compare their new video to their old video, their first video, it's a light years difference. So don't compare yourself to what people are doing right now that are already doing it. Just compare yourself to what you can do better the next time.
Definitely. That's positive.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. If you find this interesting and helpful, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be alerted about new shows. And thank you to our hosts, Sam, Ayesha, and the Duke. Have a wonderful day and see you next time.
Peace.
Yeah.